In the early years of the 20th century, Chicago was a city defined by rapid growth, industrial ambition, and waves of immigration. And within this environment, small, localized gangs began to emerge, each seeking control over neighborhoods, docks, and streets where opportunities for profit existed outside the law. Italian immigrants settled along the South Side and riverfront areas, bringing with them strong family loyalties and an understanding of local hierarchies that would later influence the structure of organized crime. Young men, often facing limited legitimate employment and systemic discrimination, were drawn to these informal networks where protection, income, and status were accessible in ways the wider economy did not provide. These early gangs were fragmented and prone to violent disputes, but within them lay the roots of what would become the Chicago Outfit, a network capable of consolidating power through organization, strategy, and selective enforcement of authority. Johnny Torrio emerged as a figure capable of transforming this instability into a structured enterprise. Arriving from Italy as a teenager, he quickly learned the advantages of strategic planning, political negotiation, and disciplined management over mere street-level violence. By the 1910s, Torrio had united several smaller Italian gangs under a more cohesive command, controlling gambling, protection, and illicit alcohol operations. He recognized that political connections, law enforcement complicity, and financial oversight were as crucial to maintaining power as the enforcement of territory and collection of debts. Torrio's approach emphasized hierarchy, loyalty, and discretion, establishing a framework in which operational continuity could survive leadership transitions and external challenges. It was during this period that Torrio identified Al Capone, a young man from Brooklyn with a reputation for both audacity and efficiency, as someone who could expand the organization's reach and enforce its authority. Capone arrived in Chicago in the early 1920s, and together they consolidated control over the city's South Side, particularly in gambling halls, speakeasies, and the networks supplying illegal liquor. The timing of their rise coincided with Prohibition, beginning in 1920, which criminalized the manufacture and sale of alcohol, creating a lucrative black market economy. Torrio and Capone moved quickly to dominate this market, securing sources of alcohol from breweries, distilleries, and smuggling operations that spanned the Midwest and extended into Canada. Rival gangs, both Italian and Irish, challenged their growing power, and conflicts were often violent and territorial. Torrio and Capone's strategy, however, relied on selective elimination of threats, absorption of smaller groups, and negotiated agreements with others, allowing the outfit to expand without engaging in constant, high-profile warfare. By the late 1920s, Capone's visibility had increased, while Torrio, preferring to minimize exposure, retreated briefly to Italy, leaving Capone as the public face of Chicago organized crime. Capone's notoriety grew alongside the organization's profits, with the outfit controlling speakeasies, brothels, gambling halls, and a growing network of bootleggers operating under a disciplined chain of command. Capone's leadership style was more assertive and public than Torrio's, relying on both charisma and intimidation to command obedience. Yet the underlying structure of the outfit, hierarchy, operational oversight, financial management, and political connections, remained intact. Revenue was diversified, extending beyond alcohol to gambling, loansharking, and extortion, with carefully managed systems for money collection and concealment. Lawyers, corrupt officials, and legitimate business fronts insulated senior leadership from legal exposure, while ensuring that the organization could continue operations with minimal interruption. The outfit's capacity to balance enforcement, political influence, and financial control marked a departure from the chaotic street gangs that had preceded it, creating a durable enterprise capable of long-term survival. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, while sensationalized by the press, was the outcome of years of negotiation and rivalry with competing factions, a calculated effort to eliminate a rival gang that threatened the outfit's North Side operations. The violence demonstrated the outfit's capacity for strategic action while reinforcing its dominance. Public attention focused on Capone, but the organization's operational efficiency, network of enforcers, and political relationships remain the true mechanisms of power. Capone eventually faced prosecution not for violent acts but for tax evasion, highlighting the outfit's vulnerability to federal law enforcement and the evolving methods by which authorities could challenge organized crime. After Capone's imprisonment in 1932, the Chicago outfit entered a transitional phase. Leadership adjustments emphasized operational continuity and discretion, with less reliance on public notoriety. The structural model established by Torrio, which combined hierarchy, financial oversight, and political alliances, allowed the organization to endure despite the absence of its most visible figure. Capone's successors, including Tony Accardo, continued to maintain control over gambling, loansharking, and labor rackets, shifting the focus from flamboyant displays of power to long-term strategic management. The outfit's approach was systematic. Each decision, from enforcement to investment, was calculated to minimize risk and ensure stability. During the 1930s and 1940s, the outfit expanded its influence geographically and economically. Las Vegas emerged as a critical opportunity, with investments in casinos, hotels, and entertainment providing both revenue and avenues for laundering profits from Chicago operations. Partnerships with other organized crime groups allowed the outfit to coordinate activities across multiple states, extending control over gambling, unions, and loansharking networks. The organization maintained a disciplined internal culture. Members were expected to follow strict rules, prioritize operational security, and enforce directives consistently. Disobedience or exposure could result in expulsion or physical enforcement, reinforcing a culture of loyalty and discretion that ensured survival across decades. Labor racketeering was a central element of the outfit's strategy. Control over construction, trucking, and warehousing unions allowed the organization to extract payments, manipulate contracts, and influence project execution. These operations were largely invisible to the public, but had a significant impact on the city's economy, demonstrating the outfit's ability to blend legitimate and illegitimate influence. Political connections enhanced this power, with aldermen, police, and officials providing protection and facilitating operations through informal channels. The combination of economic leverage, internal discipline, and political integration enabled the outfit to maintain dominance even as public attention fluctuated. By the mid-20th century, under Accardo and later Sam Giancana, the Chicago outfit had solidified its model of organized crime. Accardo's leadership emphasized financial oversight and structural integrity, while Giancana expanded political connections and extended the outfit's reach into national operations. The organization's sophistication allowed it to survive federal scrutiny, internal challenges, and changes in the criminal economy. Its operations continued to rely on gambling, loansharking, and labor rackets, with careful avoidance of excessive risk in narcotics or highly visible crimes. Violence remained a tool but was employed with strategic discretion, reinforcing authority without drawing unnecessary law enforcement attention. The outfit's evolution from street-level gangs to a disciplined, hierarchical enterprise reflects a consistent pattern of adaptation. Each generation of leadership prioritized stability, continuity, and discretion, integrating legitimate and semi-legitimate businesses, leveraging political influence, and enforcing strict internal codes. The organization's survival over decades was not the result of chance or sensational acts, but of careful planning, strategic foresight, and disciplined execution. By the late 1940s, the Chicago outfit had become a durable, sophisticated, and adaptive institution, prepared to navigate the social, economic, and legal landscapes of mid-century America. By the early 1950s, the Chicago outfit had entered a phase of consolidation and disciplined management. The era of high-profile violence had largely passed, and the organization operated with a focus on efficiency, financial oversight, and strategic discretion. Tony Accardo, who had long been a guiding figure, maintained influence even while stepping back from day-to-day operations. He understood that visibility attracted law enforcement attention, and under his guidance, the outfit emphasized insulation of senior leadership, delegation of operational responsibilities, and careful management of both revenue streams and political connections. The structure of the organization had matured into a hierarchical system: a boss at the top, trusted lieutenants overseeing territories and operations, and foot soldiers executing the directives of leadership with strict discipline. Gambling became the central source of revenue for the outfit in the post-Prohibition period. Numbers games, sports betting, and controlled gambling operations provided steady cash flow while avoiding the volatility associated with illegal alcohol. These operations were embedded in neighborhoods, often involving community participation, and overseen by mid-level managers who reported directly to senior leaders. The organization continued to maintain loansharking as a reliable income stream, operating in areas where access to conventional credit was limited. Enforcement of these loans was disciplined and measured. Violence was reserved for noncompliance or threats to operational security rather than public spectacle. Through these methods, the outfit generated predictable income while minimizing unnecessary exposure. The outfit's expansion into Las Vegas during the 1950s and 1960s marked a significant strategic evolution. Chicago figures invested in casinos, hotels, and entertainment venues, often through intermediaries to conceal direct involvement. These investments provided both revenue and influence over an emerging national gambling industry. The organization coordinated with other crime groups, leveraging partnerships to extend operational control, enforce agreements, and protect financial interests. The move into Las Vegas reflected a broader understanding of the outfit as an adaptive enterprise, one that could expand geographically, integrate into legitimate business structures, and maintain influence across multiple sectors simultaneously. Political and labor influence remained central to the outfit's power. Control over key unions allowed the organization to manipulate contracts, allocate work, and extract fees from companies seeking smooth operations. These arrangements extended into construction, trucking, and warehousing, giving the outfit leverage over significant sectors of the regional economy. Political connections, cultivated over decades, provided additional protection and operational flexibility. Aldermen, city officials, and sympathetic law enforcement officers facilitated permit approvals, muted enforcement actions, and occasionally provided early warning of investigations. The combination of economic, political, and operational influence ensured the outfit's resilience in a period of growing legal scrutiny. Leadership transitioned from Accardo to figures such as Sam Giancana, who rose to prominence in the late 1950s and 1960s. Giancana emphasized political connections and national coordination, leveraging relationships in Chicago and beyond to extend the outfit's influence. Under his tenure, the organization maintained its economic core while pursuing strategic alliances and national opportunities. Giancana's approach reflected the outfit's broader operational philosophy: discretion, structured delegation, and careful balancing of risk and reward. Visibility was minimized for senior figures, and operational decisions were filtered through trusted intermediaries to protect continuity and maintain secrecy. The 1960s also brought increased federal scrutiny. Congressional investigations, federal strike forces, and surveillance programs began to place pressure on organized crime nationwide. The outfit responded with further insulation of leadership, increased reliance on intermediaries, and refinement of its financial and operational methods. Legal fronts, corporate structures, and layered management allowed senior figures to remain insulated while maintaining influence and control. While arrests of mid-level members occurred periodically, the organization's institutional knowledge, disciplined hierarchy, and internal culture of loyalty allowed it to recover quickly from disruptions, demonstrating resilience not common among criminal networks. Violence continued to be a tool but was used selectively. Targeted enforcement addressed disloyalty, noncompliance, or threats to operations. Public acts of violence, which had been prominent during Prohibition, were largely avoided to reduce law enforcement attention. Internal discipline reinforced loyalty and operational security, creating a culture in which obedience was expected and deviation was met with swift consequence. Members understood that the organization's survival depended on discretion, cohesion, and adherence to established procedures, rather than individual ambition or public displays of power. The outfit also maintained a cautious approach to drug trafficking. Unlike other criminal organizations that aggressively pursued narcotics revenue, the Chicago outfit largely avoided wholesale engagement with the drug trade due to its high legal risk and potential for violent competition. Leadership prioritized stability and long-term profitability, focusing instead on gambling, loansharking, and labor rackets, which provided predictable income without the exposure associated with narcotics. This strategic restraint reinforced the organization's ability to endure legal and social pressures that dismantled less disciplined networks. During this period, the outfit's influence over Las Vegas grew more complex. Investments were managed through corporate and legal intermediaries, providing both profits and plausible deniability. While the organization no longer exercised direct operational control over every casino, it maintained the ability to influence business practices, enforce agreements, and collect revenue from selected operations. This balance of direct and indirect control exemplified the outfit's approach to risk management, securing influence and income while minimizing exposure to law enforcement and public scrutiny. The outfit's internal culture continued to emphasize hierarchy, loyalty, and competence. Soldiers and caporgimes managed local operations, while senior figures focused on strategy, coordination, and financial oversight. Disobedience, breaches of operational security, and threats to organizational integrity were met with firm, calculated enforcement. This structure ensured continuity, reduced internal conflict, and preserved the organization's long-term viability. Members understood that the outfit's strength derived from the network rather than individual notoriety, reinforcing a collective adherence to rules and operational priorities. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the outfit had become a sophisticated, adaptive institution. It balanced legal and illegal operations, integrated into political and economic systems, and maintained strategic discretion to protect leadership. The organization had shifted from the public notoriety of the Capone era to a covert, disciplined enterprise capable of surviving federal investigations, internal disputes, and shifts in the criminal economy. Its longevity was based on a consistent pattern: careful planning, structural hierarchy, operational discretion, and strategic use of influence across economic, political, and social networks. The narrative of the outfit during these decades demonstrates the organization's capacity for resilience. It survived federal scrutiny through insulation of leadership, delegation of operations, and careful management of finances. It navigated economic changes, such as the decline of street gambling and the rise of regulated casino operations, through strategic investment and partnership. It mitigated risk in high-liability areas, including narcotics, by exercising selective restraint. The Chicago outfit's mid-century operations reflect an organization that had evolved beyond reliance on violence or public intimidation. operating instead as a sophisticated, disciplined enterprise capable of long-term survival and influence. By the 1990s, the Chicago outfit had entered a period of subtle decline in public visibility, but retained core operational control. Decades of federal investigations, RICO prosecutions, and surveillance had reshaped the criminal landscape, forcing the organization to adapt to a world where law enforcement tactics were increasingly sophisticated. Wiretaps, financial audits, and coordinated task forces made traditional overt operations, such as visible extortion or public gambling enforcement, increasingly risky. In response, the outfit decentralized, placing day-to-day operations in the hands of trusted intermediaries while shielding senior leadership from direct involvement. This approach preserved continuity and minimized exposure to prosecution, reflecting an organizational philosophy developed over nearly a century. Survival depended on discretion, delegation, and the careful management of both people and resources. The outfit's revenue streams in this period continued to emphasize gambling, loansharking, and labor influence. Numbers operations persisted in select neighborhoods, sports betting remained controlled by trusted operators, and loansharking continued in communities with limited access to conventional credit. Enforcement of these operations remained disciplined but discreet. Violence, once a public demonstration of power, became a tool of last resort, reserved for internal discipline or threats to operational security. Members were expected to uphold strict codes of loyalty and confidentiality, understanding that the survival of the network depended on cohesion, discretion, and adherence to hierarchy rather than personal notoriety. Labor racketeering continued to play a central role in the outfit's influence. Unions in construction, trucking, and warehousing provided both financial leverage and operational control, allowing the organization to negotiate favorable terms, manipulate contracts, and extract payments without resorting to overt displays of power. Political relationships, cultivated over decades, continued to provide protection and operational advantage. Local officials, sympathetic or compromised, ensured that enforcement pressure could be mitigated and that certain economic opportunities remained accessible to the organization. This combination of economic influence and political integration ensured that the outfit maintained relevance despite declining public visibility. The Las Vegas operations that had been developed in earlier decades also adapted. While the proliferation of corporate ownership and regulation limited the outfit's ability to exert direct control over casinos, investment and influence persisted through intermediaries and complex corporate structures. These arrangements allowed the organization to collect revenue and monitor operations without attracting attention. The approach reflected the outfit's broader operational philosophy: maximize profitability and influence while minimizing risk, exposure, and public visibility. Strategic discretion replaced public notoriety as the primary instrument of power. Leadership in the modern era became intentionally opaque. Unlike the mid-century period, when figures like Giancana and Accardo could be identified and documented, contemporary leadership is diffuse and largely invisible. Decisions are made collectively among senior members, communicated through trusted lieutenants, and executed with an emphasis on operational security. This structure prevents the concentration of authority in any one figure, reducing vulnerability to federal prosecution or internal conflict. The network operates as a system rather than a personality-driven organization, with continuity preserved through institutional knowledge, disciplined culture, and layered management. Federal law enforcement pressure continued into the 2000s and beyond, with RICO statutes enabling prosecutors to target entire networks rather than isolated acts. The outfit responded with further decentralization and increased reliance on intermediaries for both enforcement and financial management. Arrests of mid-level members occurred periodically, yet the organization's continuity persisted. Senior figures remained insulated from direct criminal involvement, and financial and operational knowledge was preserved through long-standing internal relationships. The outfit's ability to survive this scrutiny illustrates its capacity for adaptation and strategic foresight, qualities that have ensured its longevity for over a century. Drug trafficking, which had been a point of contention in previous decades, remained largely avoided at a wholesale level by the outfit. Leadership recognized that narcotics carried high legal risk and could destabilize the organization through violent competition. Instead, the outfit emphasized operations that were predictable, controllable, and lower profile, ensuring long-term stability over immediate high-risk profits. This strategic restraint reflects a consistent organizational philosophy. Survival and continuity take precedence over opportunistic gain. The outfit's internal culture in this era continued to emphasize hierarchy, loyalty, and operational competence. Members were expected to maintain discretion, follow orders, and protect organizational knowledge. Breaches of trust or operational security were met with calculated enforcement, reinforcing cohesion and compliance. Training and mentorship within the organization preserved procedural knowledge, ensuring that mid-level managers could execute operations without compromising senior leadership. The result was a resilient network capable of operating under modern legal, economic, and technological constraints. By the 2010s, the Chicago outfit had transitioned from a publicly visible criminal entity to a covert, institutionalized organization. Its influence over local and regional economic activities persisted, though in more subtle forms. Labor influence, construction contracts, and select gambling operations continued to provide leverage and revenue. Political relationships offered additional protection, and long-standing networks enabled coordination across neighborhoods, sectors, and states. The organization's survival in this period was less dependent on intimidation or public notoriety than on disciplined management, strategic adaptation, and the preservation of institutional knowledge. The outfit's modern operations illustrate the evolution of organized crime from visible street-level control to covert institutional influence. Leadership is largely hidden, operations are delegated, and enforcement is measured. Revenue is diversified, combining traditional gambling and loansharking with investments in legitimate business and real estate. The network maintains relationships across political, labor, and economic spheres, ensuring operational flexibility and resilience. The organization's longevity is rooted in this combination of discretion, adaptability, and structural cohesion, allowing it to persist in a highly regulated, highly surveilled environment. In examining the Chicago outfit over more than a century, a pattern emerges. The organization's survival has depended not on spectacle or notoriety, but on methodical planning, structural discipline, and strategic adaptation. Each generation built upon the lessons and infrastructure of its predecessors, preserving operational continuity while adjusting to changes in law enforcement, the economy, and society. From Torrio's early consolidation of street gangs, through Capone's public dominance, Accardo and Giancana's institutionalization, and the modern era's low-profile management, the outfit demonstrates a consistent emphasis on resilience and longevity. The Chicago outfit today operates as a networked enterprise embedded within social, economic, and political systems. Its influence is subtle but effective, combining financial leverage, labor control, and strategic discretion. While public awareness of the organization is limited, its operational capacity remains significant. The outfit continues to generate revenue, enforce discipline, and preserve institutional knowledge, demonstrating that organized crime, when managed as a disciplined and adaptive system, can endure across decades and societal transformations. The narrative of the outfit's modern era underscores the organization's ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Law enforcement pressure, technological changes, and shifts in the criminal economy have all shaped operations, yet the network persists. Strategic decentralization, careful financial management, and maintenance of political and labor influence have ensured continuity. The outfit's endurance illustrates the effectiveness of institutional knowledge, disciplined hierarchy, and operational discretion as tools of survival in organized crime. In conclusion, the Chicago outfit's history from its early 20th century origins to the present demonstrates the evolution of organized crime into a sophisticated, adaptive institution. It is a story of consolidation, strategic foresight, and disciplined management. From the street gangs of Chicago's South Side, through the Prohibition-era empire under Capone, the mid-century expansion under Accardo and Giancana, and the covert operations of the 21st century, the outfit has survived by balancing risk with discretion, continuity with adaptation, and influence with secrecy. Its story is not one of mythic violence but of methodical organization, strategic resilience, and enduring capacity to navigate complex social, economic, and legal environments.